if your healthcare provider is calling you crazy, then your spouse now thinks they're married to a crazy person. No wonder the divorce rate is so high. We need revolution in psychology. Imagine the day when...
Hello, Valerie. Thank you so much for being here with us today for Chung Fung Institute podcast. Valerie, you are a licensed counselor, a holistic life coach, quantum psychology pioneer. How do you do that? I mean, this is so much going on in one place and so many fields you bring together. You bring the rigor and you bring the spirituality and creativity. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sushandra. It's so beautiful to be here with you today. I'm so glad we're able to have this conversation. I think, it's been so many decades in the making. Transpersonal psychology, as we know, isn't even really that much talked about in regular Western psychology. So that seems quite the paradigm shift that's needed for Western psychology, is to be able to get and embrace transpersonal psychology. And then quantum psychology would be, like you said, taking things to the next level. So I guess maybe I'll just start by saying I myself am a lifelong spiritual experiencer. And so when you grow up as a spiritual experiencer, the worldview that you hear around you doesn't make sense. And then very quickly, as a child, I learned I better be quiet and not really talk about it because people weren't really understanding. And so you learn to fit in, right? But as I was kind of growing, I know in the 6th grade, I had a huge download. I literally had learned about atoms that day at school. And so I was doing my homework, sitting on the bed, and this little 6th grader truly was like all contemplative about, well, how does it that atom knows that it's part of the chair, and this atom right next to it knows that it's part of me, and I'm there contemplating that quite seriously. And in came this huge download that was really, truly letting me know just how precious and alive and conscious absolutely everything is, even at the atomic level, what we would call subatomic level today. And yet that's not what I was learning in school. That's not what we were hearing. And so anyway, it was in the background of my mind as I got older and actually heard about quantum physics. I just, even in my 20s, I started reading as much as I could. I'm the geek that takes the quantum physics books to the beach. Mm-hmm. And, just learning and absorbing. And after many decades of that, and you start watching the world around you, you start watching like who might be also starting to understand some quantum concepts. And I just felt the time was right to really start calling it quantum psychology so people could really appreciate where we are going. And I guess in short, right, we have Western psychology that still is hung up in the Western Newtonian paradigm of seeing everything as separate. Everything is a thing. The only thing that really exists, according to them, is this physical, visible universe, even though I remind you, look at how many of us learned in school that the visible portion that we see of the electromagnetic spectrum is the tiniest little sliver. Mm-hmm. And yet interesting that our whole psychology is based on that. Our whole society is based on that. And they really, truly have not caught up with the quantum revolution. And I'm so appreciative of, I consider my forefather, Stanislav Grof, and, the fact that he was really saying, hello, the same kind of transition that we had in quantum physics and created a quantum physics rather than just regular classical physics. We need the same revolution in psychology. And I, so agreed with him. And I just think now the time is right. And I'm sure as we go forward, I can answer questions that you might have about exactly what does that quantum mean and how does it differ from transpersonal. But I'll stop there for now.
Thank you, Valerie. I love how you say you were the geek who brought the quantum physics books to the beach. me at 6 years old, I was the geek who brought the DSM. At the time, it was DSM-4 to the beach. And also
I love that.
explored. And I feel like what you're doing, I mean, the transpersonal psychology, I believe it's considered the fourth wave, right, of psychology. And then we have this, like quantum psychology seems like it could potentially be the fifth wave.
I think it's the needed fifth wave, absolutely, because what it does, transpersonal psychology blesses experiencers because it at least acknowledges a transpersonal world. So, we can call it spiritual, for lack of a better word. Notice in religious studies, no wonder they started differentiating between religion and spirituality, because religion had to do more with the practice of, but spirituality had more to do with the inner experience of really, truly, completely different kind of dimensions and worlds and beings and what have you. And of course, if Western psychology says that's all hallucination, it's delusional, people who believe in spirituality are weak. There's a lot of harm that's being caused by Western psychology with that kind of thing. So transpersonal psychology, at least, was embracing the spiritual experiences, embracing that as something very real. And, I'm not as crazy about the fact that transpersonal psychology got pulled too much into the world of psychedelics, because let's face it, our whole society right now kind of relies on substances, and it really is about chemicals, and it's about substances, and it's like, how do we use something on the outside to change how we feel on the inside? But the true problem with that is that it just reinforces to people that they need something from the outside. So transpersonal psychology is such a beautiful addition because it's helping people come to the inside, come to an inner self, and explore that. I just would like them to explore that more personally rather than through psychedelics. Do I acknowledge that there's, for some people, maybe that's really going to be a helpful treatment? Absolutely. But that's why I don't emphasize it, because really the goal is to move beyond that. The goal is to have everybody realize that they can tap into these higher dimensions of consciousness, and really experience something profound.
I've been wondering about that. Nowadays, all it seems, I'm going to generalize, that all transpersonal research is really psychedelic research. And I would think that actually minimizes transpersonal theory and the work that's actually needed right now. So I'm curious, how can people study this sort of spiritual psychology without falling away or being discredited by the scientific community, without feeling like they're obligated to study psychedelics because that's the new trend that's taking over?
So it feels like there's many questions embedded in that question, isn't there? Because on one hand, I hear you noticing that feeling obligated to study the transpersonal realms through psychedelics is seeming to be the new trend. And it's sad, but to me, it's just more emphasizing what you and I are talking about anyway, because we're talking about how people believe in a material reality. Right. And so doesn't it make sense that a substance is something physical that they feel like they can study? But yet you might as well be in the pharmaceutical industry, right? Yeah. I can't agree with you more when you say it's minimizing transpersonal psychology. I absolutely agree with you 100%. And I think transpersonal psychology, to really do people justice, is going to have to move to, studying all these other states. Now, with that said, it's happening whether transpersonal psychology gets on board or not, right? Right. Because you look at the near-death research. I'm so appreciative of the International Association for Near-Death Studies, IANS. They've contributed to the near-death consciousness experiences immensely over the decades. I mean, really, truly for decades we've been having this research, late 1800s even. I'm so appreciative that Spiritual Awakenings International kind of also evolved out of that just more recently, really. I think it was more like 2018. And I think they did that just because IANS was focusing so much on the near-death experience, and they knew that people like me, I didn't have a near-death experience, at least that I'm aware of, but I've always, my whole life, I don't have a before and after. We talk a lot about after effects. I don't have a before and after. I just have the after, but I matched all the after effects. And so, Spiritual Awakenings International was trying to point out that there are people having spiritual experiences all the time, and we don't need to die. And by them doing that, I think it helped bring the field even further, because now even IANS is starting to add a lot more categories of experience. And I think that's part of it. Now, why the quantum aspect is needed is, like you said, maybe transpersonal psychology is over focusing on psychedelics because they don't really know what else to do. But quite frankly, in the field of quantum physics and how it creates a quantum psychology, here are a few things we know. Again, from near-death studies, from psi studies, precognition studies, remote viewing studies. I mean, the list is long of the various categories of research into other states of consciousness that we have. And one of the phrases that we hear over and over is realer than real. I mean, we can really distinguish between these states, and they feel realer than real over and over and over again. Well, I can't think of a single field out there in science that gives us any more clarity around any of that other than quantum physics. Now, quantum physics does so because it started finding out when it learned about non-locality. That was huge. And let me differentiate for the viewers, because the world of matter and energy mostly is electromagnetic when it comes to, what we experience. And in psychology, notice that they even ignore the electrical signals that are happening, but, across the synapses between neurons, because they're so focused on the biochemicals that are either being dumped in the synapses or being taken up. They're so focused on the chemical that they're not even paying attention to the fact that it's energetic signaling that's actually happening that creates all of that. So at the fundamental level, even of the body, it's more electromagnetic and quantum. But for right now, from a research standpoint, they're ignoring that electromagnetic part. But here's the key thing, and to your point that was embedded in that question about the ridicule people face when they're pioneering something, because in electromagnetism, it's called local signaling. Why? Because if it's an electromagnetic wave, so the viewers can picture dolphins swimming in the ocean, and they're so synchronized. And that's kind of how waves travel. It takes time, it takes space for the electromagnetic waves to travel. And in the world of psychology and neuroscience, we call that local signaling. There's local signals. So when neuroscience starts dismissing a lot of this, they're like, there are no local signals. Well, it's quantum physics that helps us understand that there's something called non-locality. And that's what Einstein referred to way long ago as spooky action at a distance. Somehow, these things, there's certain things that they're studying, and they start happening, it seems, simultaneously, which means, wow, it's breaking space-time rules. It's not taking time and space to travel. Well, you look at experiencers, and they have non-local experiences and consciousness all the time. I mean, it's constantly happening. You look at the telepathy studies, right? Like, if you're having precognitions where you tap into the future, and I'll tell you about a remote viewer friend of mine to give a good concrete example. But if you're doing that and you're reading something from the future, how is that possible? It's non-local consciousness. I mean, there's a lot of mounting evidence there. So this remote viewing friend of mine, it's interesting because one of her tasks was to, when they're in these research protocols, all they know is there's something called a target. They aren't told what it is. It's just that here's your target, this blank box, and you're supposed to tap in tap into your internal psi to see if you can figure out what information are you getting about this box that you know nothing about. And so by protocol, they're supposed to not edit themselves. They're supposed to write down every impression they get, and then it's graded by a judge later. Well, as it turns out, an example of one of the things that she had such high hit rates on, the target was, and I'm not going to have this exactly right with dates, but let's say she was sitting on a Tuesday and writing all this down on a Tuesday. What she didn't know is her target hadn't even happened yet, because her target was going to be something printed, let's say, in Saturday's paper, but in a certain page and in a certain place where they always have a photograph. So it was like that photograph on that page in that newspaper on that day. But the way they pick that photograph is they pick it from a pool of pictures that, let's say, come into this AP, photography pool on Friday, but the events haven't really happened except for on Wednesday and Thursday. But she's sitting on Tuesday. So the event hasn't happened. The picture has not been taken, much less being published in the paper. And she was right on with exactly what happened. So we need non-local consciousness to be really understood. And that's a key difference between quantum psychology and transpersonal. Transpersonal is more generalized. Oh, we have these vague spiritual experiences. They seem to be beyond the person, so we call them transpersonal. Quantum psychology, it is going to be the next wave, because it's going to take us to specifics. It's going to help us realize that there truly is non-local consciousness, and that we all have it. We are all interconnected at a quantum level. There's really a quantum self embedded in all this electromagnetism. And there were quite a few quantum pioneers that first started out saying consciousness is fundamental. Like you said, that's been ridiculed, and a lot of people don't want to go there. But there's such a growing number of people who are coming back around and saying, the more we advance quantum science, the more we realize consciousness truly does seem to be fundamental.
How do people know if they're tapping into this sort of quantum consciousness versus creating an illusion? I mean, people really want to have some psi phenomena happen, and they're like, oh, I'm experiencing XYZ, and it becomes a spiritual emergency.
Well, that brings up several questions too, right? Spiritual emergence from spiritual emergency. And so really quickly, like you said, just because we have spiritual emergence doesn't mean we're in spiritual emergency. Emergency, we're going to say, wow, this person truly is having a mental health crisis that we really have to help them navigate. And at the same time, you can have spiritual emergency without it. How can you tell what you're tapping into? There's a fine line that would probably take a longer conversation that we have time for. However, what I will say to viewers is there's going to be things that are obvious. And so when the obvious happens, like look at all the people who ended up getting some precognitive vision or dream or something about 9/11. Right? So there will be obvious things that happen. Look at how many people believe. Look at all the after-death communication research. So look at how many people believe they've had an after-death communication with loved ones. It's very common. And so on one hand, somebody could say, when I have something that seems to be, it's non-local, it's definitely not local. It's got to be non-local consciousness, and it's breaking space-time rules, and it's supposedly impossible, but wow, quantum physics is helping us understand how it's possible. Then they can just allow themselves to rest into that place that, no, I'm not going crazy. I'm tapping into quantum, and explore it. Because if we try too hard, it doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, if you chase an experience, even joy, if someone is having this amazing memory of this amazing time that they had at this phenomenal beach and this vacation, and they're trying to recreate the experience for themselves. You can't. I mean, experiences are truly unique, and that's very quantum too. But chasing it doesn't happen. It's like as we relax into things, and as we just acknowledge, like through an intention, acknowledge that this is here, and we might definitely have some of our biofield that's electromagnetic and what have you, but there's a quantum aspect. The word that is argued, the word often used, like let's say by David Bohm, was there was an implicate order embedded in an explicate order. There's a lot of people today that don't like the word embedded. They might like the word concurrency better. But we can imagine that there's many domains and many realms all happening at the same time. In quantum physics, there's concepts called like superposition and concurrency and multiverse theories. And so there's several concepts that point to a multidimensional realm. And so when we're tapping in, we can just start acknowledging these other dimensions and just be playful in our mind.
I love that curiosity aspect, this playfulness. And
yes.
I notice within myself, like when I teach classes with meditation or contemplative practice of any sort, and the common downfall is everyone's chasing a certain experience and then they're disappointed.
Yes.
I'm curious, Valerie, these days there's so much talk going around about we're living in a simulation, AI is part of that simulation, or it's not, and so much debate amongst researchers, academics. Tell us a little bit about how does quantum psychology fit into that? What answers can happen?
Yes. So let me give maybe a sentence about quantum psychology and how I view it, and then compare it with your question on AI. Because quantum psychology, I actually grimace if I hear people trying to boil it down to a particular method. I just like quantum physics is not a method. It's an entire discipline within the field of physics. It's a paradigm within the field of physics. Quantum psychology has got to be that, in my opinion. We have Western psychology and Eastern psychology and transpersonal psychology. But when we have quantum psychology, and it truly is the next wave, and when it truly is in place, then what we're going to realize is the methods fall in a spectrum. Mm-hmm. And they're all useful, right? Like everything that Western psychology has given us with cognitive behavioral therapies. And, there's just so many therapies that are very useful in how we treat when people really struggle with anxieties and depressions and OCD and PTSD and all of these things. There's so many useful methods. But notice you and I are very aware of where they fall short. And so they don't have any answers for it. But when we now have a quantum psychology, now we have a place for all of it, because as we venture from the personal realm and the subconscious and our neuroplasticity and our epigenetics and the way our biofield is working at a very local electromagnetic and physical biochemical level. But we will leave that and it starts heading into the transpersonal realms. And then that's where, as we have a bigger umbrella called quantum psychology, we will continually be developing these methods that are more quantum psychology methods. And for me, my focus is going to be on more of the meditative, like you said, natural state methods, as opposed to the psychedelics. The psychedelics to me fall within that bridge realm, but they're clearly more pharmaceutical. Really, it's no different. It's more pharmaceutical. It just has a different purpose. But when people are in spiritual emergence, now quantum psychology is going to really be able to help them, because they don't have an uphill battle of having somebody understand that their experiences are even actually possible.
Yeah.
They will know these experiences are possible. These people will no longer be harmed. I think, just as a quick aside, I think in a 2023 symposium by IANS, I think I heard that the divorce rate for near-death experiencers is 70%. The after effects of having these experiences are such that your worldview changes, you're feeling your need for purpose and meaning for your life, and how you are going to move through your life dramatically changes. And imagine that you're trying to communicate this to a spouse, friends, family, loved ones, and they are looking at you like you are crazy. They're telling you to get to a doctor or a psychologist, a psychotherapist of some kind. And then you go there and then you're called, oh, it's hallucination, it's delusion. And then you can't let it go, right? Because you have been profoundly changed. No wonder your spouse and you end up getting divorced, because if your healthcare provider is calling you crazy, then your spouse now thinks they're married to a crazy person. No wonder the divorce rate is so high. That to me is completely tragic and unnecessary. Imagine the day when providers are very well trained in a quantum psychology, understanding the realms of consciousness, can differentiate between psychopathology and spiritual emergence, and can validate the experiencer, just give the experiencer space. And to me, it's always about, now, what do you want to do with that opening? And then many of the Western psychology methods anyway are going to be helpful, because it's about how do we live in this life when we're still living from a more quantum reality. And so I think in the Buddhism tradition, I always loved a story that I heard about apparently some wise sage, and basically, an answer to a pupil was like, yeah, before awakening, you're chopping wood and carrying water. And after awakening, you're chopping wood and carrying water. I mean, no matter the experience, we have to come back and live in this world. And that's where psychology needs to focus, not getting on debating and devaluing the person's experience and saying it's impossible and they're crazy. No, it's as simple. I can't even tell you how many clients have had profound healing within one session because they came into me and they heard me say, I know all kinds of Harvard, MIT, Stanford scientists that totally say they know exactly what you're talking about. I show them a few books on my shelves. Like that alone, just somebody saying, I believe you, is so profoundly healing. And I have so many examples of that, but I'll stop there.
It just reminds me when I was studying counseling, clinical counseling, and there was such an emphasis on Carl Rogers. And I think of Rogers speaking of unconditional positive regard for others and for oneself.
Yes.
And of course, we all learn that, yet how many actually implement it in authentic ways? And what you're saying here is not just accept what's being said, accept what's being heard, not put on this mask, but actually understand that, yes, there's a level of reality to all of this here.
And I think what people have to realize, there are many, in this community, let's say most people are probably of Christian background if they have a religious affiliation. And so they have their priests and they have their pastors. But this goes for all traditions, really, I'm sure. They have to realize that many of their pastors and priests have never had an experience, ever. I had a pastor admit to me that he doesn't even know how to pray. He knows how to preach. He's a very effective preacher, but he doesn't know how to pray, because a quantum, right? If your belief is still that you're here and then you die and you go to some heaven, you aren't realizing that heaven is within. I mean, right? The true teachings of Christ was all about the kingdom of heaven is within. And so those profound teachings have not been understood. Quantum psychology will even create a huge gateway for completely I was going to say re-understanding, but it's like truly realizing profounder, deeper and deeper insights about even what all these various religious and spiritual texts are saying. So if most of our spiritual leaders have never had the experience, hopefully, as we get better at methods and better at methods of teaching direct experience and ones that don't take 30 years or a lifetime, to learn, I think quantum psychology is going to help us there. All of these ways we're studying how to transcend. That's really important for me.
I think this goes to the importance of when looking for a teacher, or looking for a priest, or looking for any spiritual support. It's have to kind of vet it out, right? Like have to examine, have to look and see. And for those who are spiritual teachers, it's like before teaching, are we really embodying? If not, then maybe practice first, longer.
And I'm glad you said the word embodied, because that dovetails on your previous question. And when you were bringing up Carl Rogers, right? Because I don't think in research, Western psychology acknowledges that there's something about the presence of the therapist.
Yeah.
And let's just profoundly take that in for a moment. There's something about the presence of the therapist. But like you said, it's what kind of presence? Do they have a mask on? Are they coming in with authenticity? Is it truly unconditional regard for the highest beingness of who's in front of them? And when you profoundly listen, you will find that you become quite psychic with your client. And quantum science helps us understand what is that modality, what's actually happening there, and what is going on with your presence. It's a quantum presence. It's an electromagnetic presence, but it's also a quantum presence. And so those two large categories, I'm feeling called to elaborate a little bit, if that's okay on that.
Yeah.
At the electromagnetic level, imagine that there you have your biofield. Wow. And if each of us, right, we take in this in-breath, and on the exhale, we're sweeping, inhale, and exhale, sweeping. And if we're bringing awareness, we will start to feel tingles and various sensations along our skin. And it's helping us experientially realize the true magnitude and reality of the electromagnetic biofield. Like, this is energy. It is as a certain frequency, and there's more than one frequency. And I could elaborate there, but I won't for right now. But you have this beautiful electromagnetic field. And the thing about energy is it travels. And yes, it fades with distance, which is why then you have the non-local stuff, because the non-local does not fade with distance. And by the way, in studies, they will shield in psi experiments, they'll shield with Faraday cages, because then that's how they rule out that it's electromagnetic effects. Because if it's electromagnetism, then the Faraday cage would make sure there's no results. But anyway, you have this beautiful biofield, you have these beautiful energies, and here you are, a therapist, and here's your client. Your client is emanating energy, you're emanating energy. And if you are holding the higher consciousness state, your client will start in training to you. And what that means is that they have a heart rhythm, you have a heart rhythm, they have their brain waves, you have your brain waves. But whoever is the more coherent and laser-like and organized versus chaotic all over the place, they truly organize the waves of the chaos. So what happens is, let's say, I'll use our dolphin metaphor again. These waves are traveling, they're syncing up, the peaks and valleys are aligning. So that's kind of getting in sync. They start to resonate. Well, here's the magic that happens when they resonate. They start having a mutual vibratory effect on one another. So I change you, you change me. And we start falling into our own rhythm. Look at how many women start having their periods around the same time when they live with one another. That's an example of entrainment, of how we're mutually affecting each other's rhythms. And so imagine that the therapist truly is this higher consciousness soul coming in with authentic presence, coming in and just being there and just being where their client is. And so there is like that unconditional, beautiful love, this beautiful regard for their client. And they will find that through this probably entrainment process, but that's more electromagnetic, but there's something going on at the quantum level, they truly will become more psychic with their clients. I know that's what kept happening to me when I opened my private practice, because I don't experience myself as psychic. What did to me, the word psychic meant I go around seeing dead people. That's what psychic meant when I was growing up. And I don't see anything, and I don't see dead people. And yet, client after client after client, are you psychic? Are you psychic? Are you psychic? And what I just kept really appreciating at a profound, reverent level was how my energy field and theirs were being combined. And I could read the information in the field. And again, quantum science helps me then go down that route and explain it. But feel the profundity of that. When we realize what's happening in the therapist-client relationship in the office. And by the way, we condition even the space, this space. A cool thing, there's a Stanford material scientist named William Tiller. I so love that he went on this deep dive, because he and other advanced meditators started doing all kinds of really cool experiments. And what they noticed as a result is that they were actually not only were able to do the experiments, which that's another part of the conversation if you want to go down that route, but they noticed that there was something about all this intention that they were doing, and they could remove the experimental conditions and apparatuses, if you will, but the space was still holding the imprint in the direction of the intention after the device was gone, even like 8 months later, and, like a long time. It wasn't this quick fade. And he went further, and he was able to tell that this meditative intention focus, this consciousness, was changing the physics of the space, specifically gauge symmetry. We don't really care what gauge symmetry is, but isn't it cool to know that a physicist has a way of measuring how we've changed the space? So now, and I bet you can resonate with this, all of a sudden I was having aha moments of why my clients would step in the threshold of my office and they would say, wow, I feel all kinds of energy when I walk into your office. And they would also say things like, I feel somehow when I'm here, I'm cheating. I can achieve these states better here with you than I can at home. And in the beginning, because I'm always learning, every day I've learned something new. But in the beginning, I had probably had an inner shrug. I really didn't know what to say. I had no words for what they were saying because so many of them were saying it. But after I learned of William Tiller's work, now I realized, wow, my clients and I have conditioned the space because we talk about such high spiritual, cosmic, quantum conversations that are so deep. We truly have changed the condition of this space.
I believe that because I know before I lived with my master, when I go to her space to practice, and I think, wow, I can get into such kind of deeper meditative states, and I go back to my place, and that was different. Now I live with my master, and I see, like, even coming into the space, it's very different than ever in the past when I lived anywhere else. I think that's like the thing when someone practices, when someone's actually not merely speaking the words and having a different internal experience, right? When we're really truly 100%, nothing can stay the same. And yet it looks the same from the outside.
Exactly. And no wonder maybe for viewers and listeners realizing that if you're going to start practicing methods to truly touch into a more spiritual reality, if you will, and really start experiencing it, choose your space with careful thought about what resonates for you. Because if we bring internal awareness to our inner state, and in a very authentic way, it's not like we don't have to start with, I'm in an enlightened state. No, I can be in a traumatic state even. Like I could be horribly depressed or horribly anxious. But here's the thing. Imagine that I am. And imagine I just close my eyes and I bring awareness. It's like I'm scanning a flashlight through my body. And I'm like, wow, I feel that profound sadness in my heart. Wow, it feels this big. Wow, the more I look at it, it has a shape, it has a feeling, some of it's thick, some of it's thin. And then you'll really bring that awareness to your inner body. And that beautiful act of just gently observing and having compassion for how you're feeling at the time, that's like divine love. And it starts changing the state just with your awareness. Because you're not beating yourself up. You're just literally taking a flashlight of your mind with that curiosity word, that awe, that wonder, like, wow. And just noticing, what is this experience of sadness like? And it starts changing with your awareness. By the time you finish that, your state is changed, which is quantum physics, observer effects. They notice that when we observe something, it is changed. It is no longer what it was. Imagine that we all learn how to do that rather than use a drug. Yeah. Imagine we learned how it's unbelievable how simple things can be, but we make them so complex. But there is such a wisdom to just being able to go inside, acknowledge, just notice, and then watch as it's transformed. And then in a way, you'll just watch as it just keeps moving. But when you're picking your space to go maybe start these, if you're picking a space that has really bad memories for you, let's just acknowledge it's going to be harder. If you're picking spaces that are full of other people's energy imprints that are really negative and yelling and what have you, it's going to be harder. But it's no mistake that most people find nature. Or if people resonate with sacred spaces, clearly they've been conditioned. Yeah. And just notice what is sacred for you, right? What is sacred to one won't feel sacred to the other. It just depends on our own unique kaleidoscope of energies and consciousness the way it is now. And how does ours intermingle with that space? And there's this beautiful magic that happens. And so just notice what space helps you transform. What mantras help you transform? What prayers help you transform? Just don't worry about other people's methods for you. Get to the point where your inner wisdom is helping kick in your self-healing, because it's literally telling you what you need next in every moment if you definitely have the eyes to see and the ears to hear.
This kind of brings us to your book, Living in Quantum Reality. You outlined a consciousness map of the body through the body. This is connected, isn't it? Can you tell us more?
It is, and I appreciate that. this is what the book looks like for viewers. I didn't mark the consciousness map page, so if I see it right away, we'll see. If not, I won't worry about it. But imagine that you have these swirling energies everywhere. And imagine there's a lot of people in the West that are now familiar with the word chakras from going to yoga and what have you. And so we can imagine that chakra is Sanskrit for wheel, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And so doesn't it make sense that they called it wheel? Because you have all these swirling vortices. And if you do have clairvoyant sight, you will see that there's vortices that it's like a cone that goes outward from each point, but front and back, because these are etheric. And I'll just say, imagine that they are electromagnetic, but there's the quantum in them, but they're like these vortices of energy at the electromagnetic level and all the way down, right? So most people talk about the majors being 7. So the base of the spine, right, is 1. The reproductive organ area is 2, kind of around the solar plexus area. The abdomen is around where 3 is. 4 is that beautiful heart. 5, 6, 7. And imagine that in the first 3, if those 3, especially first and second, in our society, it's really chakra 1 and chakra 2 that is feeding us the most. It's the most active. It's the one we're noticing. It's the one that's driving us. It's the one that's motivating us. It's the one that's really spurring our desires and our actions, why we like what we like, why we notice and look at what we look at. It's because those first and second chakras are really driving us. And then as we're evolving, it's always a process of bringing more and more of these energies online into our actual awareness. So when we move into the 3rd, it truly is bringing the awareness of like more the intellect, like, bringing more of a wise mind into things, bringing more of the observer mind, and we can resonate with career things and what have you. But by the time the 3 have come together, and in some esoteric circles, it's considered a very sacred triangle. But when these 3 areas come together as one, we've now kind of actualized our ego. And in so many spiritual circles, the ego is talked about in negative ways. But I find that has not served. My spiritual clients that come in really dissing the ego. There's a lot of negative effects that happen with that. And it's certainly not love. And so what I would really want to encourage everyone is, as those are coming online and the ego is actualizing, be in appreciation, be able to be in self-love, notice what your specific traits are, your specific loves and interests, because you truly have a unique snowflake of energy, and you have to be able to appreciate what your skills and your natural traits and interests are. But then in the awakening process, we now go into transpersonal categories, right? That's more personal. It's about the I. And we awaken into the heart energies, and all of a sudden we're a we. And we start noticing that we have a real struggle to define the boundaries of the we. And in, Ken Wilber is a philosopher, and a lot of people are maybe familiar with how, he talks about these increasing we's in a way, right? You have expanded sense of we's, because you're going to go in the beginning from thinking we just means you and your spouse, or you and your immediate family. And then as you continue to awaken and continue to expand, all of a sudden you're like, no, wait a minute. I really identify with my community. And then you're like, but wait a minute. I really identify with my state. No, I identify with my country. No, I identify with the entire globe. And then the cosmos. So the more we're expanding, the more broad this we-ness consciousness is. And that is hugely significant, because it truly takes us into quantum purpose and quantum nature. So we're expanding. And as we've expanded into the heart, notice the throat chakra is about how are we expressing the higher self through the lower self. Is it just lower self being expressed, or is higher, more loving, divine loving we self, is that being expressed through our everyday? So no wonder that those near-death experiencers who are profoundly changed and then their spouse ends up divorcing them, like they are driven to have different careers and different things, because truly purpose takes on a we purpose. It's about serving mankind. It's about serving the globe. It's about serving the environmental and all species, and even the sacredness of the cosmos, not mining the moon for minerals. So it just keeps expanding. And then along with it, more things come online. So this sixth chakra, that's like the flashlight into the beyond. It's more, it goes into, no wonder we think we're psychic. We see other things. We hear other things. We, like all these other, it's like a higher version of our five senses. Now we're seeing beyond. And in through the crown, I know my crown is just constantly bringing in all kinds of insights, but it can only awaken us, incite us to the degree that we are open and ready to be touched. Right? If my awareness is closed down to my first and second chakras, none of this has anywhere to go. It's pretty much atrophied or non-active. And then the more I'm opening up, the more active it becomes. And so really we see that a quantum psychology view expands the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and a Maslow vision of self-actualization, which really is kind of more egoic self-actualization. And it now expands to the cosmic quantum self is actually felt. It's real. It's not imagined. And some people will say you're going from egoic consciousness to soul consciousness to even monadic consciousness. So you always have the higher body that is ready to manifest through the vehicle that you're giving it. I'll stop there.
I love how you always seem to bring it back to common humanity. I mean, all the work I read of yours and everything I'm seeing, you're just like, common humanity is so important. Right? To live in the space of love with all beings, genuinely, not from a textbook, not from an ideology, but really do the work. So, Valerie, I would love to ask you this. People who really need this work, which is all of us, let's get real. How can they find you?
It is all of us. Oh, they can certainly find me through my website if they want, valerievaran.com. I'm not great at keeping everything completely updated as far as my recent activities, but they can find me through there. And there's also links there to contacting me, to my phone number, to LinkedIn and Facebook, where I will post some things. So I would just love anyone out there who feels like they would like to even do some coaching, right? Like sometimes we have people who have spiritually awakened and they would really like some coaching and support and what have you to really, truly, fully come online. And they really appreciate this quantum perspective as they're emerging into this higher self. I would be so honored to be able to help any of your listeners that would like my help.
Thank you, Valerie.